What's going on? We got Rody just trying to log in over here. Let's get it, Kevin. As you say, Rody's popping in. He's got the nice True DFS in the background. Hey man, how you doing? And yeah, we're ready to after this slate.
Yeah, man, it's an interesting slate today. We got a lot of things going on, I think.
Yeah, definitely having to take some pivots off of what I wanted to do just because of the winds and the weather in the games I like. Now I still have my highest owned quarterbacks are still Lamar and Josh Allen, but I definitely have spread out my ownership a little bit, and I've gotten much less on to Trevor Lawrence, which I was into, but I don't want to do it in the 15 to 20 mile an hour winds. I am more okay with Hurts in that situation because he's a running quarterback anyway. He's got some big receivers he could throw to, like obviously Brown. So I'm okay with keeping Hurts in, but I do have less of him than I started with, and I've gotten on to some more Mariota than I wanted to, and I've gotten on to more Justin Herbert than I expected to. That is
Bobby, I like it.
there. It is.
Herbert,
We're
you
finally
got
together
Herbert,
on San Diego.
huh?
Well, we're finally on it on San Diego, huh? Finally together on the. I mean, sorry, the Chargers. I
The
keep saying San
Chargers, yeah,
Diego,
yeah, yeah.
L.A. Chargers. Excuse me. Sorry, they'll always be San Diego to me. um, but yeah, so we got a lot of questions. And we got the weather things. Then we've got the value receivers. What do we do with the Detroit things? I'm spreading out a little bit personally. I feel that a little something feels nerve wracking to me about the Khalif Raymond chalk, obviously. And I actually don't see him being as chalky as I thought he was going to be. I like Josh Reynolds the best. I would have liked him even if Shark was in. But I mean, it could just as easily be this Cephas. And I think the real best plays are it just solidifies more of Jamal Williams probably and Hawkinson. Both those guys are going to be popular, but that's what I think where I think the ownership's going to go in that game. And what to do is I am spreading out with some of all of the receivers they have, but mostly I'm highest on Josh Reynolds over Reynolds, Raymond, then Cephas in that order. If you're going to use any of them, but I don't think you have to use any of them. I am, however, needing some value, and they are the guys who I like a little bit better than some of the other ones out there. Richie James is another one I'm going to be using some of. Of the cheap ones, but who are you using? What are you doing with Detroit to answer Rich B's question to start off?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've kind of been a little bit lighter on Detroit. I think if I like the Jamal Williams, I think it's a good play. He's been taking a lot of Swift carries lately, but today now he's so chalky. You know, um, I think that they might have to spread it around. A little bit more today. Like you said, Cephas is an option, Reynolds an option. There's just a lot of options. Hawkinson's chalky. Like, all these guys are chalky, but like for upside, one of them's going to get, might get there. But like, a lot of these guys are going to bust, I think, today. And that game I loved earlier this week. I even like Metcalf and Lockett. But man, Detroit, I don't know. I like more Khalil Herbert versus over Jamal Williams today. I think I'm getting a little bit of Jamal, but like I'm going to be less on that game.
Yeah, and we're going to welcome in saying what's up to Sheets. And Sheets, first off, we talked a little bit about the weather briefly is not great for you've got wind. It's rain doesn't bother me when it gets windy, and they're saying it's really going to be hard to throw the ball downfield, both in Philadelphia and in Buffalo and in Baltimore. So what are you doing, if anything, about that? And then what do you think of the Detroit receiving situation as well as the Giants receiving situation?
All right. First of all, just to put just to add a little more color to it. I'm 5 minutes late because I was just taking a walk, and I'll tell you this: the weather in New York ain't no bargain either. Yeah, it's very windy out there. Now I don't know how that translates to inside the stadium and all that stuff, but I will say this: that for as long as I've been alive, the Meadowlands has always had like more wind than every place else in its surrounding area. Okay.
Right.
Back when I was like really into the Giants back in Phil Simms and that era, they would literally like draft guys because they could throw tight spirals in that wind. Okay. In the Meadowlands. Okay. So, I'll throw that out there. I'm glad I'm stepping in and White. We were talking about the Detroit receivers because I think once again I think we're going to be a little bit different. I'm actually finding a little more difficult to get away from than you might be. I mean, they're just so cheap. And the in-game environment I think is so good that I just don't see how they fail. and that's very dangerous to say, in GPPs, right? Because like you're supposed to get different and all that stuff. But listen, earlier in the week, I'm like, okay, with Sam Brown out, Shark's going to be chalk, whatever. And then Shark out too. I mean, these guys are like free in a against a team that can't really stop much. In the dome, I just finding it difficult to not play them, especially considering that what I want to do is again be stubborn and do what I did last week. And kind of try to fade the Herberts and the Montgomerys and the Montgomery, the Herberts and the and the Jamals and the Houston guy, whatever, and maybe kind of pay up a little bit for running back. So and play something like Derrick Henry or something like that. So for me, I'm finding it a little bit more difficult to get away from Detroit. Now I'm going to because I'm not going to have like if I ran my builds the way they are right now, I'd be getting like literally like 1,000,000%. You know what I mean? I'd be getting like 75% TJ Hawkinson. You know what I mean? Like stupid shit like that. Like 50% plus of Josh Reynolds. In GPPs, and you just can't. I don't think you can do that. But I'm having difficulty figuring out how to deal with that. So that's where I'm at with the Detroit thing. The other thing I'll say about the Detroit game, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier in the week when we first talked about this game, and about the slate in general. I really don't see a universe where I'm going to get that overweight on Geno Smith in GPPs. You know what I mean? Like where you need 200 points to win. I get it. He's cheap and I know where the targets are going and it's a good game environment and all, but I don't know, man. I just don't think it's right. I mean, my first run, I have like 29% like Geno Smith or something like that. I'm like, what am I doing? So that's why I'm very befuddled by this first game. And I think getting that game right is pretty important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm spreading out receiver to make it clear for those guys. I do have a decent percentage, especially in my higher buy and smaller field stuff. I have a good amount of Khalif Raymond and I have a lot of Reynolds overall. Anyway, Hawkinson is going to be the really chalky one. Yeah. And I have a good amount of him as well. What I'm sort of running into though is like, how does that compare to there is going to be what we just said about Detroit is also, I mean, it is true that the weather is bad, the wind and everything is going to affect it and it's an uglier game, but still one of Richie James. And I did do it. I forced Kenny Golladay into 2 lineups just because I want to say, just in case. But Richie James is another one that's a cheap receiver. You've got Rondale Moore in the Arizona game. There are other places you can go for value and you can play all those guys together and stack up the top running backs. I think that's another route to go. Rody, how are you finding your builds before we get to a couple questions in here? How are you finding your builds shaking out in terms of what teams you're stacking and what game environments you're really focused on? Because I do think that some things definitely have changed for me. I was never on the Geno Smith thing. I don't have any Geno Smith lineups. I just don't play him in tournaments. I would rather play Mariota. I'd rather play Jared Goff on the other side of that game personally. You get Goff with a really cheap stack, and then you can pseudo stack another game. That's, I think, a really good way to go. What are you doing, Rody?
Yeah, I have like just a sliver of Geno just because, like they're popping a little bit and I want to lock it Metcalf stack like that in that game. But like I'm actually in that game, I'm taking a lot of Rashad Penny a little bit, maybe a little over on him. I don't really like the play. I mean,
I have a lot of them as well.
You got Kenneth Walker there coming up too, but he got like 70% last week. Penny did.
And so, Homer is out for what it's worth.
And he's kind of like the get different off that game, and everyone's on all this other stuff. I'm gonna go to Penny on that game. I think I'm big on the Chargers game, Houston game. I'm getting a lot of like Dameon Pierce at that same price range, a little bit in there. He's getting the workload. One of those guys, Cooks or Dameon Pierce, gonna get the volume eventually. They're gonna have one of their big blow up game, and Chargers haven't looked that great, and they've been competitive almost all games on defense. Maybe that game stays a big scoring game. Chargers score quick, and Houston's coming back firing. So,
well, tell me about that game a little more if you wouldn't mind. Because you guys both know the Chargers really well, and with Keenan Allen out, do you still think that the Chargers are going to be putting up points in that game? Or
I love the main guys. I love Palmer,
I like that.
Mike Williams, Eckler, and Gerald Everett.
I'm the same exact as you, Rody. I think you could argue for Josh Palmer as well. I personally will go Herbert with Eckler, Everett, and Mike Williams.
Okay.
And I'll
Yeah,
run
I
it
got a
back.
lot of that. I mean, I'm big on I'm building a ton of Herbert lineups today.
Great.
I don't know why, but it's what I'm doing.
That's
You
really
can
helpful.
double Herbert today. Okay, you can get Khalil and Justin in together.
Oh, I
That's
got
right.
so much Khalil Herbert and Justin Herbert.
There
I
you
started
go. The
making
Herbert combo. I have a
lineups.
weird feeling me and Brody might have the same lineup actually. based
Yeah,
off
I've started
Khalil.
making lineups to not put Herberts together. Like I'm like, if both fail, I'm like screwed. Or one does,
Yeah.
good, one does. I got to get a little different. So I've been working at that. That's what I've been doing the last 20 minutes. So
The other
Yeah.
thing, again, while we're talking about these early games, and we brought up the Bears game a couple of times. There's also the very obvious thing that you can do in that game, and it's going to be popular. But I mean, the Giants have all their guys out. I mean, they could just really just give, if they felt like it, give Barkley 10 touches out of the backfield, or split him out wide or something like that. He's going to be pretty chalky, but again, if you build lineups with him and another higher priced guy, look, Barkley was kind of stuffed last week, and he still somehow managed to get there because of that one big play. I think that's kind of the simple. I think that's the kind of the simple play out of that game I like the Richie James thing, because the one thing about the Richie James play is that, you know, if you took a snapshot of the slate, you know, on Tuesday or Wednesday, you know, when Shepard was out, but say Shark and Amon St. Brown might be in, like Richie James could have ended up being like, you know, 30% owned or something like that. But because, like you said, because you have all this now competition, you have basically better plays, you could argue, in the Detroit game, that perhaps the Richie James kind of falls not, you know, through the cracks, but at least it's going to be much lower owned. And you get that wind problem, which, look, is a problem, but it's going to keep people off the game. And, you know, the fact that I don't know, that people are going to be playing Barkley as well. Maybe Richie James is not as high owned as we once thought he was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's a fair point. And just people popping in questions. I think one of the biggest, all the questions we always get and always see, I feel like it always reminds me of we're doing it wrong. If you're starting your builds with quarterbacks, I just don't think that's a smart way to play. You could start with a game stack that you like or something, but it shouldn't be, oh, Aaron Rodgers is 6,300, we should play him. And if you ever do want to focus highly on a quarterback, you want to do it on one with massive rushing upside, especially on a day like today. So I'm fine if you want to go out and play a Green Bay stack and just think that they put it on New England. Okay, that's fine with me. But there's nothing that stands out to me about that being an especially crazy thing. What does stand out to me is Kyler Murray being unowned completely when he has the same ceiling all these guys do. And I think that's something I want to get a piece of. I also think their offense will open up more with Rondale Moore. So that's another game that I've sort of come a little bit more onto and got some stacks of. I also like the run backs with DJ Moore. And I especially like McCaffrey, obviously. So it's a natural little game stack you can get to over there. Are you guys getting to any Arizona at all? Because I feel like they're getting completely overlooked for a team that usually but when week 4 comes around, Arizona's the most expensive. You got Kyler Murray, the most expensive. Arizona's putting them the most points. They've been off to a bad start, but I actually think that they're a really, really legitimate pivot off of some of these other chalky things. What are you doing with that, Rody? And then go over to Sheets.
Yeah, they were kind of one of the flyer games that I was looking at. Usually I pick a couple stacks where I go kind of really off the board. I think the Cleveland Atlanta game was kind of that, but now Mario's getting, like you guys talked about, a little more chalky. So I think maybe the Kyler Murray would be where I'd pivot my kind of off the board stack this week. I'm adding a little bit of a Kyler Murray exposure as we speak. So
how about you, Sheets? Are you getting any Murray? And then what other stacks are you focusing on?
Right. So I'm not getting to Kyler Murray this week. I would make the argument that Rondale Moore is a similar pivot off of all this Detroit stuff at that price. And yeah, I do think that eventually Arizona is going to be high owned. I think that's not going to be until Hopkins comes back, though. With respect to other stacks that I'm looking at, and these are stacks I'm not getting to right now. These are stacks that I'm going to be forcing in. One that I brought up earlier in the week, which I'm gonna do, is the Raiders and that game to play stuff like Devontae Adams and maybe Matt Collins and run back with probably Jerry Jeudy would be my favorite of the Denver guys, just because Sutton had the big game last week. So I like that. And the other one, I just keep thinking this is going to work. And that's going to be the Pittsburgh Jets game. And one thing that, I mean, I shout out to, I think it was the Blitz that discussed, I don't know if he discussed it or whatever, but it was a comment that I think that game projected to be like for the most plays of like any game on the board for some reason.
Which game?
The Pittsburgh Jet game.
Oh, the Jets game? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a highest pace, or like it's going to be the most play. Yeah, it's
highest pace up game or something like that. And I'll tell you something else. Like every time I start running my lineups, I'm not getting stacks with it, but I'm getting just a shit ton of Deontay Johnson, and I'm taking that as kind of a sign. You know, I don't know.
Oh, I think it's Deontay Johnson is like a safe play with massive upside. I think it's a great play.
Yeah, and so with that said, I mean, you know, I think I'm going to end up taking a shot. You know, you got those two. You got upside guys from the Jets with the new with both the quarterback and the rookie wide receiver or whatever, Wilson, whatever. And you got Elijah Moore, and then Pittsburgh. You know those skill guys. You know, Najee Harris is going to be 0% owned. I think. You know what I mean? Like I just weirdly think that game is going to deliver, and that's, I'm not getting any stacks in my builds, but I'm going to probably force that in. So going back to what I am actually getting in my builds, like I said, I mean, Seattle, Detroit. And then I also want to comment on something that we talked about on Tuesday. You know, towards the end of the day, I was saying, listen, I want to fast forward ahead to Monday. We can replay this. I want to fast forward ahead to Monday, and we're saying, oh my God, why the hell, after all the nonsense and processing, did we not just play the freaking Buffalo-Baltimore game? You know, like, why didn't we just go play Josh Allen, play Stephon Diggs, play Lamar, and at the beginning we thought Andrews was going to be the greatest play ever, you know, whatever price of receiver, but now all of a sudden TJ Hawkinson's 60% owned, right? And why aren't we just playing that game instead of messing around with all this other stuff? And maybe, just maybe, it's really not going to be that highly owned at all.
I said this the whole week. That game is just simply not going to be. It's going to be more highly owned now, I think, than it ever was, even though the weather's bad. So. Because it's still not going to be high owned because you can now get the pieces in. You just simply couldn't get the pieces in comfortably, and now you have some value at receiver. We're willing to take some reaches and we have Herbert and Jacobs and even to some extent Rashad Penny as cheap guys you can use now to stack that game. The way I'm stacking that game though a lot is I'm using double tight end with Knox and Andrews.
Come on, Bobby, really? You got the same builds today.
I'm telling you,
my only Josh Allen lineup in my big dollar line is Josh Allen, Knox, and Andrews. That's I always started that lineup exactly like
I chopped the other one the other day. I'd be more than happy to chop with you today, man. We can chop up $1 million together. It sounds good to me. But okay, yeah. So that's interesting for our other stacks. I mean, let's talk a little bit about some other, because the Cleveland Atlanta game, I do have some Mariota stacks, as I mentioned. I'm not getting to much of the Cleveland side of it Brissett side of it, but I am getting a lot of Nick Chubb. And we talked, me and you talked about that early in the week, where I am, you know, double, triple spending down at receiver or double, triple spending down between 3 out of the 4 receiver tight end spots. I'm going to be playing some Nick Chubb and Eckler where I can. And those are the guys I'm a little bit high on because of the field. I mean, Eckler's gotten more popular, but I love the spot for him. It's an interesting game that I feel like we should maybe talk a little bit more about. I think the natural way to do it is you just play London with Pitts, and then you run it back with either Chubb or, I guess it would be Chubb or Cooper, or both. And that's sort of what I'm doing with that game. That's the other one I got onto. I mentioned I'm about 45% of my lineups are still Baltimore, Buffalo. And then I've gotten onto the Jacksonville, Houston game. And I did throw in a couple for sheets, the Russell Wilson, Las Vegas Raiders game. You were the first one who pointed that out. And I feel like that's becoming like the trendy, everybody's sort of talking about it as the potential game. So shout out to you for at least being ahead of what everybody else was. When the more people have talked throughout the week, the more I've heard people talk about that game. But I don't know how much it gets owned outside of like Sutton or Judy, maybe a Darren Waller and Devontae Adams. But if you play it with Wilson, I think as a full game stack, I think it's a very viable route. So what other stacks haven't I mentioned? And Sheets, I'll ask you if there's other ones that that maybe I didn't mention that maybe a little bit more off the board, a little lower owned. And then we can start talking about some individual plays at positions, which we've been doing. But Is there any other game before we get out? Stop talking about stacks.
No, I think you covered all of them. I mean, I'm looking at literally all the games I have stacks of, and I think you covered literally everything. I have like one lineup with the Eagles, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, same here. I lowered my Eagle ownership, but I do have a couple. I still left a couple Trevor Lawrence and smaller stuff, and then I left a couple Jalen Hurts in. Rody, no other games for you? Do you want to go to start talking about best plays at each position?
Yeah, we can talk about best plays. I think we mentioned quite a bit, pretty decent about stacks. So
okay, nice. All right, let's talk about running backs because we have you have Jamal Williams, Khalil Herbert, Josh Jacobs all being played because they're cheap. At the high end, people are going to play Taylor and Barkley. I personally am going. Well, some will play Eckler too. I'm going Eckler, Najee, and Chubb as my favorite spend-ish ups. And I love Dameon Pierce partly because I like that game today. You could play him instead of Herbert and Jacobs, and you'll get lower ownership. You could play him in addition to those guys to save money across the board. Jamal Williams, the last couple times this has happened with Swift, they haven't played Jamal Williams more than like half the snaps. He actually got less snaps when Swift's been out than when Swift plays. But I don't think that's going to be the case today. So I'm good with all these guys. The guys who I have the most on though is Pierce, Eckler, Harris, Williams, and Herbert. Those are my main core of running backs. And then I'm mixing in some McCaffreys in those Arizona stacks that I mentioned. I'm mixing in some other guys that I never really thought about until with Boston Scott out. I do think Miles, and the weather being what it is, I think Miles Sanders might be a better play today than I originally thought. So I'm going to throw some of him in at literally like 1/6 the ownership of Jamal Williams, just because I can get different doing so. Rody, what running backs are you maybe over and underweight on? I'm definitely underweight a little bit on basically any spend up that's not named Eckler or Chubb. How about you?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit too under on Barkley, Jamal Williams. Those would be the guys I'm a little bit under on. I do have a lot of Khalil Herbert. I do have a lot of Eckler. I've got a little bit of McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor sprinkled in, do a high priced up spend up back with a kind of a lower price. I got a lot of Dameon Pierce. I got some Chubb, as we talked about earlier on the show. I started sprinkling some Aaron Jones if I get up to also, I like the running game and the Packers game a little bit, maybe even Packers defense type over that game. But yeah, those are pretty much all the running backs I'm filtering in. And then Rashad Penny, I'm getting a lot of him too. I do like that. She's just talking about that Jets Pitt game. I do like some Najee Harris. I've been playing him a lot this year. Hopefully he finally has a decent game. I like him pairing him with like a receiver, maybe like Garrett Wilson or one of the guys Moore or something. Like I do like that game. So getting some type of correlation in that game, I really like to do. So really that's kind of where I'm at for running backs. Pretty condensed with those main guys today that I like. So
same here. How about you, Sheets? What are your high-owned running backs?
First of all, a couple of comments. I'd like to get some clarification on whether Cordell Patterson is playing. Last I saw, it was a questionable, and he was going to see how it works in warmups or something with the knee.
Yeah.
So I'd just keep an eye on that. I don't think I'm going to play whoever his replacement would be. Is Mike Davis still on that team?
It does. I mean, I don't actually. Let me just double check real quickly. I'm not sure that it matters particularly for me.
I don't think so, but I just want to.
No, it would be the.
It'd be
Alligator or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
it would be at 4,500. He would probably become.
Maybe he would actually. Yeah, I think you're right.
4,500 on DK. Yeah.
But then again, we also have Penny at 4,900. You know what I mean? Is he a better play than that? Probably, but will the ownership go directly to him? I think it might actually more, but I'm going to guess Patterson plays. From what it sounded like to me, I thought he was going to go, but we'll probably know in the next 20 minutes anyway how that looks.
Aside from that, the names that you gave are the same types of names that I have. I would say a couple of things. First of all, I don't want to try to guess, and this is probably a mistake. I don't want to try to guess the Green Bay running backs. I think you can make a case for either of them, but I'm just not going to try that. I will also like to be a little stubborn and say that there was once a world where you had running backs and pass catching running backs against Arizona. That's what you'd want to do. And there was once a world where Christian McCaffrey, people were playing at 10K. And And if, on a week like this, where really what you're supposed to do is pay down for these running backs, play Jamal and Herbert and all them. He's still in my, I guess, deep in my brain, I think he has a 30-point ceiling. So I'm going to get over on him. I'm also going to get over on, haven't decided whether it's going to be Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry. It's going to be probably one of them, though. Again, it's the same thing. I mean, I want to try to get a ceiling for him to have a running back. The other guys that you mentioned several times, both of you, and quite honestly, like every sharp person that I've listened to this week agrees with, and I'm not going to fade that just because like a lot of people are doing it. I really do like that Nick Chubb play. He for every single week, what happens is people say that he's an under-owned sharp play. And then people think, oh, then now he's going to be played, but nobody plays him. Like just literally nobody plays him. And every week, and against Atlanta, he's got to have even more of a ceiling than he usually has. So I think that's it's going to be a good play like forever. So as far as running back goes, the other thing is I need you to talk me into these like Dameon Pierce, for example. So is he also going to be getting targets, or are we relying on them just like them keeping the game close and him getting just pure running points, or what kind of running back is he?
Yeah, I mean, he'll definitely get he'll usually get a target or two. Maybe he has a little bit of more upside there. What you worry about with him is that they gave Burkhead a ton of the work week 1, and Burkhead is more their receiving back. So you're going to end up with there is somewhat of a split between those guys. You're going to have to worry about that. But I think last week, what did Pierce see? He was like almost 2-1 in terms of playing time over Burkhead. It's sort of gone more and more that direction. But it is going to be primarily on carries, although it's always hard to say that because even Derrick Henry, it was a guy who literally didn't have a target for like 6 weeks in a row. And now this year, they're getting him more involved in the passing game. These guys are going to find ways to get their running backs involved. But Pierce is more of generally you'd think of him more as a runner because they've used Burkhead as the pass catching back.
I will say one other thing about the Jamal Williams play. That other running back is going to get work. What's his name?
Yeah.
Craig Reynolds.
Yep.
I'm just not convinced that Jamal Williams is ready for like the full Monty. You know what I mean? Just not sure about that, but whatever. That's just more of a gut than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that, and like I said, the last times this has happened, they have not featured him more than they actually have used him less than they do in Swift in the game.
And Detroit, it seems like every year we get one of these games where someone's supposed to do whatever, and then you get the Amir Abdullah game. You know what I mean? Like it just seems as though there's something that always gets in the way of the chalk Detroit running back. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know.
No, I hear you, man. I hear you. Jason Dixon, who just popped in, said no Nick Chubb. I don't know how he got that. We've literally, I think we all talked up Chubb, right? We all like Chubb as a spend up, right?
Does he say no Nick Chubb, meaning he's not playing?
Oh no, I think he's asking like us why we weren't saying Nick Chubb, but I think we said it a bunch of times.
Oh, okay.
I think so. I don't know for sure. So all right, let's move out. Let's move out of tight end, and I'm sorry, running back. Go to receiver quickly. Obviously, it's going to depend on some of the games you're stacking. I do think the ownership on Johnson and Lockett being the highest owned receivers, along with Brandon Cooks, I feel like all of those plays are a little suspect. And of course, Devontae Adams is a little bit suspect considering how things are going right now for him. These are your highest owned receivers. So I'm very okay being underweight on all of those guys, even though I like Deontay Johnson as a play. But I mean, as the second highest owned receiver on the slate with Trubisky as his quarterback, there's certainly, you could argue, other ways to go. The Richie James, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds are going to be the cheapos that everybody goes to. We like Rondale Moore as a pivot. We've mentioned that earlier. I still think DJ Moore is going to have a game-breaking type of game at some point, slate-breaking type of game at some point, and he's 5,300. He's just too cheap. Amari Cooper is another receiver I like quite a bit today. Stephon Diggs, as obviously in that game. Drake London, Curtis Samuel is one that I like, but I haven't gotten to much of. AJ Brown. Those are the guys I'm using the most. I also like. I think that people will go away from Dobbs with the other value, and I think we got to make sure to play some Dobbs for Green Bay. Those are my guys. Sheets, why don't you start off with some who you like, and then we'll go to Rody.
Yeah. So in my initial builds, as you might imagine, I'm getting the Seattle guys, right? The Metcalf, Lockett, Reynolds, whatever it is. But I keep coming back to the two one-offs. I get a decent amount, and I mentioned Deontay Johnson already. And the other guy, and you mentioned this, I keep getting is Brandon Cooks, and I don't think he's going to be as that popular. In other words, I don't think you're getting like 20% on Brandon Cooks, because if you did, I would try to fade that. I think.
Well, that's what I think he's going to be.
You do think he's going to get that highly
15+%? I would imagine.
Okay. And the other guys you kind of touched on. I will say this, just again to retout that Vegas play. Matt Collins, he's not just like a guy to like spell Hunter Renfrow. The guy's good.
Yep.
I mean, the guy is good, and yet another guy who is a pivot off of all the Detroit stuff.
Right.
So more and more, I'm kind of into sitting on my fat ass at 1 o'clock and rooting sort of for Detroit, Seattle, but sort of against it, and then just saying, okay, Mac, okay, Raiders, let's go, let's. I know we'll let Russ cook on the other side, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. As you listen, we talked about this on Tuesday when we were analyzing the slate. Remember the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, there were 3 or 4 plays that kind of like stood out as kind of smash plays that you either had to, play or fade. You know what I mean? But 53 totals in domes and all this stuff. And this week just seemed really thin. You know what I mean? Overall, as far as just like plays you have to make. Like the Buffalo-Baltimore game kind of stood out, but everything else is kind of like the Detroit-Seattle game is a game that looks good, but I won't say only because, but in large part because of the injuries, and that's look, that's a good reason, I suppose. But if you play like these pivot stacks, I don't think it's a bad idea, because I don't think there's one game that you're going to need to actually have. So again, I'm trying to talk myself out of what I said when I first came on the show. Is like somebody talked me out of having 1,000,000% Detroit Seattle game. It was hard for me to get off of it, and I'm sort of trying to convince myself to do it. I'm still not there yet, though. I mean,
I hear everything you're saying. I actually think you made a really good point about the slate overall. And that's sort of what I was trying to allude to when the top 6, 7 owned receivers are all extremely suspect plays to me in terms of being, at that ownership. I don't know why Tyler Lockett has to be 20 some odd % owned versus why is he better than Metcalf today? You know what I mean? There's just a lot of different things you could look at. I just don't quite think it all makes sense. So I'm kind of for the idea of spending down on some of these receivers this week. On some of these speculative plays. We mentioned Matt Collins. We mentioned Dobbs as a lower owned one. Rondale Moore, Richie James, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds. And maybe spending up for the running backs that not everyone's spending up for. Maybe playing more of the McCaffrey, Chubb with, two of McCaffrey, Chubb, and Eckler together, or even Barkley. And it allows you to get a little different. It also allows you to spend up for Andrews and take Diggs if you want to go that route. So I wouldn't buy into the chalkiness of some of these top projected receiver guys. So I do think you can get off the board very, very easily this week and come up with some different builds by game.
Before we go on to tight end, actually maybe I'll deal when we get to tight end, because I have another stack I want to talk about. We'll get to tight end and I'll remember.
Patterson is in, by the way, according to Jason. We appreciate that, Jason, very much. Thank you. Rody, how about your receivers, and then we'll move on to tight end.
Yeah, like what Sheets was saying, like a lot of Cooks is popping up for me. I do like that Denver game. I think Jerry Jeudy's price is pretty low. Sutton and they have to do something one of these days. Like I feel like that's gonna happen. Same with DJ Moore. Like he's at 5.3 on DK. Like he's their go-to guy, and they're gonna have to do something. I like a lot of my stacks, like Mike Williams coming in low. He's priced up at 7K a little bit, but he's not getting the ownership. So I really like him in that stack. I like Palmer. Everyone's going to play Lockett, but yeah, DK Metcalf, he's been the guy, big red zone target, huge dude, and then we talked about that pick game with Deontay Johnson. It's popping a ton, but I actually like Chase Claypool a lot. I'm getting him in some of my
like that.
He's real cheap too at 4,700, I think, on DK. Yeah, and he's projected a lot less, but way less ownership, and they spread it around a little bit, so I think he's got a good shot at getting a pretty big game. So yeah, those are most of my receivers that I'm on, mostly with my stacks, I'm I'm kind of off the Diggs. I'm off Diggs. I'm off CeeDee Lamb. I do like Drake London 6'1" a little bit in that game, run back with Chubb. Like I like Pitts to run back with Chubb. But yeah, I'm getting a lot of this Cook stuff. I'm getting a lot of the, some of that, Jerry Judy. I do like Dobbs, how you mentioned Dobbs at 4,500. I think throw him in there. And then another Houston player you can play is Nico Collins if you want to stack the game up a little bit different as well. So yeah, I mean it's pretty condensed for me. I'm just kind of rotating these guys all in, and then you said Matt Collins and Devontae Adams and Waller. Yeah, I'm putting those guys in a lot of my lineups. So like I know people aren't on that Denver game, but like it seems like I have a lot of like Jerry Judy Jacobs or Devontae Adams and Denver receiver Waller and Judy a little bit too because I like Waller's price. So yeah, that game interests me a lot. So.
Yeah, I want to throw out that Zay Jones is out, by the way. So if you still like the passing game at all from Jacksonville, I think that's a boost for using Marvin Jones as your number 2 receiver more than not an exciting cheap one, but just throwing it out there because I did have a couple of Zay Jones in my lineups. Another guy, one last guy to mention at receiver that I'm mixing into this sort of that's what I'm doing is spreading around all these 4K guys, but I like Nico Collins a little bit in that Charger game as a value saving sneaky run back if you're going to be stacking that game up. So let's jump over to tight end real quick. I'm going to be highest on Mark Andrews. I'm going to be very, very high, way over probably one of my most overweight the field on anybody is going to be Dawson Knox. I think he's going to have a monster game at some point. Maybe this is the day. I like Njoku and I like Hawkinson, Pitts, and Waller. Those are basically all the tight ends that I'm using. But I don't mind if you want to use Gerald Everett in a stack. I don't mind if you want to use Zach Ertz with Kyler. I don't mind Dallas Goedert at all. I actually think Dallas Goedert's a pretty good play. But the ones I'm going with the most are going to be pretty much most of the highest owned ones, except for Dawson Knox and Njoku will be pretty high on my list. How about you, Sheets, and then we'll go to Rody.
All right. So as I mentioned in the prelim, I'm getting 4 billion % TJ Hawkinson, which I have to do something about. Okay, just because he's going to be really popular. You mentioned Pitts before, makes sense. Njoku makes sense. Everett makes sense. Mark Andrews. I'll throw in to the tight end pool. I mean, we always talked about Waller, but I'll throw in Freiermuth as another part of that Pitt Jet game. So here's another guy I'll probably play, but it reminds me to bring up something else. So I want to bring up Robert Tonyan for a second, and for this reason, talked about this on Tuesday, and I'm still a believer in this. So I want to say this as background. So one of the things that happens when a team, when a team has like no quarterback and very little offense, is it provides the other team usually a short field. So I talked about the Patriots and their 15-year legacy of just like stomping on people pretty much. And when you get a team like that is finally down, and now with like no quarterback, just really, really shaky, when you have a team that has the ability to put it on them, you're gonna do it, okay? And I see a world where Aaron Rodgers is kind of let loose a little bit, and he gets these short fields. He's like, you know what, F you, all you know what I mean, and puts some 5 freaking touchdown passes in this game. He may not have to, but I don't think it might matter. And so I feel is that Aaron Rodgers plus like you said, Dobbs, Lazard, what's his name, Tonyan. I think that whole thing can deliver on a slate that is not that loaded with games.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you said, really, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I'm not doing the Aaron Rodgers thing, but I have no problem with the thinking behind what you said. Rody, what about your tight ends? I know we some crossover here, but I know you like Everett and Knox. Who else are you looking at?
Yeah, like I said, Waller a little bit. I'm trying to get down on Hawkinson, like Sheets was saying. Kyle Pitts, I'm throwing in there with the Chubb stack, like a little mini correlation. I don't mind that Pat Freiermuth and that, Pittsburgh game a little bit. I think that's going to be like, if it actually plays up to what it's supposed to be, that could be a good place. Goddard is another play was getting really low owned today. I think he's got a lead upside, but we are concerned about that weather in that game a little bit more now. But I mean, it could help him if getting some short dump offs across the middle. So maybe that's an option. But yeah, Robert Tanyan, I have in a few lineups as well. I was throwing that in there, trying to play some of that game. I think a little bit. Someone's gonna have to score some points if they got Green Bay almost 25 points. So someone's gonna get some touchdowns, whether it's Aaron Jones, Dylan, or Tanyan. Or Dobbs, like you talked about. That's pretty much about it. I don't have any crazy flyers today. It's going to be that week where like Will Disley scores like 2 touchdowns, and nobody has him. And
I hope it's not Noah Fant. And we're all waiting for Noah Fant to pop off, and here he is.
Gosh, dude. I might have to play both those guys now because like I don't know which one's going to be right.
It's gonna be somebody. But Noah Fant was a pretty decent part of that trade for Wilson. And they barely are using him. It's just the weirdest thing.
And I like that player. I think he's really good, and I there's a lot of potential there. I think he could be a really good player. So, another guy I didn't say quick, Zach Ertz. If you want to, he got overthrown a couple times by Kyler in the red zone. He has touchdown upside, I think. So they look for him in the end zone. So if you want to do a Kyler skinny stack, him and Ertz, because you don't know whether Brown or Moore is going to get the work. Maybe Ertz gets a couple touchdowns and then that Moore stack, or not the Moore Murray stack. If you want to play that game, so I like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving over to defense to close it out. Just is not the most fun closeout, but I'll just real quickly go with my defenses that I'm using the most. Both sides of the Giants and Chicago game. I do like Jacksonville as a defense at 2,300. I know that looks weird to people, but their defense has been really strong. I know Hurts has been awesome this year, and I'm leading the charge, by the way. I'm very happy to watch him like this, but I think that he's a little there is a script where he can make two big mistakes, and their defense has looked really, really strong. I also like the Texans, even though I know that it's weird against Herbert, but Herbert will sling it around, which gives you opportunity for turnovers and whatnot. And then you never know if he's still a little banged up. You sort of, get a little bit of your outs there because I am going to be stacking them as well. I'm not really paying up for much. I'm getting to some Seattle, actually, with all the injuries on Detroit. I'm getting to some of – I'm just taking a quick look through my actual lineups. Mostly it's highest owned are Bears, Seahawks, Giants, Falcons, and Jets for me. How about you, Sheets, and then go to Rody?
Yeah, my usual disclaimer is that I don't think you should ever have more than 20% of a defense in GPPs. That said, there's one play that I'm finding it very difficult to avoid. It's windy, it's rainy, and I think the Eagles get like 2 pick sixes in this game.
Okay.
I think the Eagles are just clearly the best defense. I don't know
what that looks better at the 3,800 than the Steelers against the Jets.
Yeah, I do. I don't know. Could I tell you?
Yeah, maybe. That Pittsburgh defense is legit. I just want to throw that out there. I would take Pittsburgh over them, but I certainly understand your case for the Philly. Go ahead. Sorry, Jeez. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I mean, and again, I'm getting the Steelers, getting all those guys that you mentioned.
How about the cheapos? You like the?
I'm getting the Giants,
yeah,
Panthers. The usual.
Yeah, I like Arizona too. By the way, in that same game. Sorry, go ahead, Rody.
Oh no, I mean I don't have much to add. You're spreading it around a little bit. Maybe I even threw, Washington in there a little bit. 2-6. I like the Jags. I got a lot of them at 2-3. And I got a shitload of Seahawks guys. I think everyone wants to play these Detroit guys today, but they're missing a few of their best players. And the Seahawks could get a hold out on them. That game could be like a low scoring game, and everyone's hoping for a 40-40. So. I'm gonna play the penny. I'm gonna play the Seahawks D, on that game. I do have some Steelers. I do like them at 3,600. I got a couple lineups where I had a bunch of money left over. I paid up to Green Bay, but Steelers I like the most, and the Bears a little bit too in that weather game. I'm not as high on the Giants today. I'm low on Barkley, low on Richie James, so I kind of attack defenses that I'm kind of low on the other sides of. So,
yep. I understand it. Eric Johnson just popped in and he says that he's high on Russell Wilson today. We know that Sheets mentioned him early in the week, and I've come on to a little bit of the Russell Wilson stuff myself. So, no, come on, Eric, this whole thing. This guy, not everything has to be so black and white. It's not 150 lineups and we do it all one game. You could do that if you want to. not the way that I want to play it, but sure, go ahead. It's not like if you make 149 and it hits, you're not going to probably get the right mix in there somewhere, or at least close to it. You know what I mean? I don't know if that extra lineup, maybe you throw in, maybe you mix it around a little bit, but I do think there is an argument for that Denver Raiders game for sure to be a potential going off, where earlier in the week I was lower and Sheets was high on it. Any other strong takes that we have before we get out of here? Guys, ask any questions if you have any, if you want to spend a few minutes doing that, but, Rody, any other major takes, Sheets, any other major things that stand out to you that maybe we haven't touched on? Because I feel like we've gone through most of at least what we're doing.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm just so like I put it out there, so this way I make sure that I do it. Just want to let you know where I am coming in at the end in my builds. I am unless something happens in the next whatever. On DraftKings, my highest leverage stacks will be Pittsburgh and Vegas, and I don't have a lot of hoodoos today. Like I didn't come into like any of these like P Browns and these 2%ers.
I actually don't think. By the way, I don't think he's a bad play this week. For what it's worth, we didn't mention him at tight end. He's 28, 70% of the snaps. I would take a shot on Pharaoh Brown this week. So,
nice.
So maybe that's an accidental hoodoo that maybe gets somebody there, because I
don't. The other guy I am significantly over the field on is Christian McCaffrey. So that's
like it. Okay. And my whole take was sort of the general way I'm treating the receiver position and using some of these cheaper guys, paying up for some of the running backs that are going to be lower owned. And I am still going to be paying up at a tight end. And I have a lot of double tight end stacks, even with the Andrews and the Knox. I have Andrews and Goddard. I have some Andrews with, I got a lot of Andrews. Some Andrews with Hawkinson. But I just think it's an interesting build and allows you to spend up at the running back positions or in the mid-tier of receivers if you want to get that Buffalo game stack, which I still think is a really, really good game to stack.
Check this out. What's that? As I'm running this build, guess who's out?
Who?
Well, Zay Jones and
I said Jason. Yeah.
And P Brown.
He's out?
He's out.
Oh, okay. Well,
he's
so
out.
Much scratch what I said about him then, because
he's out. P Brown is out.
So no Pharaoh Brown today. All right, but I think that pretty much does it for Eric Johnson asking about Waller at tight end. I think we all like Waller fine, right? I think we're all.
He's been a little fishy this year, but
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he's gonna have that big game soon too. The double touchdown game. Someone's gonna do something over there.
The only thing about Waller, which I guess people have talked about, but I'm just really realizing it, is one of his main attributes was his red zone targets. And I think with Devontae Adams there, it kind of reduces that a little bit for
I agree
Waller.
with that. I agree with that. I still think he's very viable. I think there's still some still some pretty heavy upside for him. The more you talk about individual plays, the more I think about it, I keep getting back to that Seattle Raiders game. That's what keeps happening. You know what I mean? Because Matt Collins, I have interest in. I have interest in Waller. I have interest in Sutton. I have interest in Judy. I have interest in Jacobs. Like all of a sudden, it makes sense to stack that game more than in just hope that Russell Wilson has a flashback or just that he's had some really down games to start the year. All right, Rody, anything else for you before we get out of here?
No, man. Just keep it good. Let's always get it.
Yep, absolutely. Sheets, any final thoughts?
No.
All right. Well, good luck to everybody, and appreciate you all being here. Please like the video before you get out of here. Check out the site and everything, and let's make some money today, guys. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.